Welcome and good morning and Happy New Year to everybody. I am Michael Babb, the chair of the Southwest Florida Water Management District Governing Board and the board's Hillsborough County representative. I now call to order this regular meeting of the Governing Board for January 19th, 2016 at 9 a.m. at the district's Tampa Service Office. Mr. Adams, do we have a quorum?
We do, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Please stand for the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please bow your heads as we pray. Heavenly Father, let me thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here today, thanking you for your blessings which you've already bestowed upon us and for the blessing of life itself. Lord, we thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thank you, Lord, for allowing us to live in a country where we can gather and ask your blessings on events such as these. As such, Lord, we ask you to bless us all here today with the spirit of compassion, with knowledge, and Lord, with the wisdom to use both. I pray for the agenda set before us today. Please give us assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in the wonderful state of Florida. It is in your most blessed name, Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let me begin by quickly introducing the members of the board and our two executive staff members seated at the dais. To my right is our Executive Director, Robert Beltran. To Robert's right is Vice Chair Rainey Maggart, who represents Pasco County. To my left is Secretary Jeff Adams, who represents Pinellas County, and Treasurer David Dunbar, who represents Pinellas and Hillsborough counties. The remaining board members listed in order of seniority are Paul Simpt, represents Polk County, Wendy Griffin, represents Hillsborough County, George Mann represents Polk County, Brian Beswick represents Hardy, DeSoto, and Highlands counties, Tommy Bronson, who unfortunately is absent today, represents Hernando and Marion counties, Mike Moran represents Sarasota and Charlotte counties. Ed Armstrong represents Pinellas County. Kelly Rice represents Citrus, Lake, Levy, and Sumter counties. And John Henslick represents Manatee County. Finally, seated at my far right is Karen West, the district's general counsel. Good morning. Following the consent agenda, our procedure is to address remaining agenda items through 4 committees: Resource Management, Finance Outreach and Planning, Regulation, and Operations Land and Resource Monitoring. The governing board meeting is being recorded for broadcast on government access channels. To ensure a high-quality recording, please remember to speak directly into the microphone. Also, the meeting is available for viewing via internet streaming. If you wish to address the governing board concerning any items listed on the agenda or any item that does not appear on the agenda, please fill out a speaker's card and submit it to Ms. Manuel. Your card will be provided to me or one of the committee chairs, and we'll call on you at the appropriate time during the meeting. Public input for issues not listed on the published agenda will be heard shortly after the meeting begins. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. When appropriate, exceptions to the 3-minute limit may be granted by the chair. If several individuals wish to speak on the same issue or topic, the designation of one or more spokesperson is recommended. Please silence all cell phones at this time. Thank you very much. I do have several blue cards. Do we have any more? Okay. At this time, we'd like to do employee recognition. We have the opportunity of doing 4 here this morning. Monty Ritter, Chief Professional Engineer for 20 years for SWFWMD. Colleen Andreas, a Data Architect for 30 years. Colleen Crook, Lead Land Use Specialist, 30 years. And Cynthia Taylor, Receptionist for 30 years. So congratulations. Please come forward. Cynthia's
Yeah.
At this time, I'll ask Mr. Beltran, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, there are no additions and deletions to the posted agenda.
Does the board have any items which need to be removed? If not, there's a good cause to amend the published agenda as followed by the section 125.25. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as stated? All in favor said aye.
Aye.
All right, nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Well, that's an extension. I'll do that. At this time, the public is given opportunity to comment on any topics not listed on the agenda. I do have now 3 blue cards. Janet Dart. Janet, are you here? There she is.
Good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Janet Doherty. I'm currently the Executive Director at the Environmental Protection Commission for Hillsborough County and a former governing board member. And I came in front of you in December with some concerns about the pumping of Morris Bridge Sink and some permit conditions. And I'm here today to give kudos extraordinaire to your staff and especially your Executive Director. He reached out to us, and our scientists met with your scientists, and our staff met with your staff, and we came to some resolutions and some tweaks in the permit, and he turned it around at FDEP. Definitely want to thank, I think it was Ryan Matthews, who turned it around in like 48 hours, because we were on a very narrow timeline. Also, Robert Beltran reached out to the stakeholders and Friends of the River, and they're here today as well. So we are a partner, and we're going to partner together through the MFLs and through the permit review of the recovery strategy. But I didn't want to miss this opportunity to tell you that you have incredible staff and incredible scientists, and I want to personally thank Robert Beltran and Chairman Babb for reaching out to me originally, I think it was in November as well, to have a lunch to discuss these issues. I don't have the sign-in sheet from that meeting, but I do remember some people that I think are incredible scientists from when I was here, Mark Hammond and Eric DeHaven, Alba Moss, John Emery, and there were 3 or 4 others. But I feel very good about our environmental protection for the county as we move forward together. So once again, thank you so much, Robert, for reaching out to the stakeholders and including us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown?
Rich Brown, Friends of the River. After decades of cramming a half hour of talking points into 3 minutes, it's a delight to tell you that your staff did a spectacular job. Democracy worked. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. John Obnick?
John Alvink, Friends of the River, 3025 West Van Buren Drive. As Ms. Doherty and Mr. Brown, I'm a member of Friends of the River. I'm here to thank you for constructive dialogue, for continuing the constructive dialogue we've been having since 2000, when the minimum flow was implemented throughout the recovery strategy. And I look tremendously forward to continuing to work with SWFMUD, with the board, with the scientists, in the current issue, Morris Bridge, and the future issues that are going to be dealing with in the Lower Hillsborough River Recovery Strategy minimum flow. Thank you very much for reaching out. Thank you for constructive dialogue. It's amazing how that works. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, could I thank these folks for coming and telling us as board members, we need to hear that staff is meeting with you, reaching out. And if you don't mind, would you tell the media? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, I just want to take a second and thank everybody for showing up today and expressing their gratitude. I do appreciate them sitting down with us and talking about it and avoiding potential legal issues and legal battles, and it really saves money for the taxpayer at the end of the day. We clarified many things that was in our permit with them, and everybody feels much better about how we're moving forward. So thank you again for coming.
Staff, thank you very much. Thank you and your team. Thank you. Before the board considers action on the consent agenda, I do have 4 blue cards to talk about item 20B on the agenda. So at this time, we need to go ahead and move that from the consent agenda and put it on the regular agenda. Is that correct? May I go ahead and have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the opportunity to move 20B to the regular agenda?
So moved.
Any discussion? Not all in favor, say aye. Aye. Nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. At this time, I'll go ahead and relinquish the gavel to Committee Chair Stimped.
Resource Committee is called to order. Item 24, Peace, Minnesota Regional Water Supply, Mark Hammond.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Mark Hammond, Division Director for the Resource Management Division here at the district. This morning we have an action item for you. So at the end of the presentation, we'll be asking for, we'll provide you a staff recommendation and asking for your action. There are a couple of changes in the recommendation. I'll go over those, just slight changes when we get to that. What I wanted to do is just briefly give you a little bit of background on this project. Again, it's the Peace River Minnesota Regional Water Supply Authority Phase 1 pipeline and also the City of Punta Gorda RO project. After I give just a brief background, let me see, ask Pat Lehman from the Water Supply Authority to get up and provide you some context on what's been accomplished since the board took their last action item back in 2014. So I'll give you the background on what the governing board took back in 2014. Mr. Lehman will get up and talk with you in terms of what they've accomplished since then, and then I'll get back up and walk you through what your options are for consideration for funding. Again, the background is that back in July of 2014, the governing board approved funding for design of the Phase 1 pipeline with the Water Supply Authority. Now, keep in mind that this is a pipeline there that had been designed. The authority was going to construct back years ago. They were not able to get the funding and the approvals in place to construct the pipeline. So when the board approved the funding for design, also required that any of the contracts or necessary approvals were done before we spend any money on design, because we didn't want to spend any more money on design and then they not go forward with it. So again, when the governing board approved funding about $250,000 towards the design, you required that the execution of any necessary contracts to construct the Phase 1 pipeline would be put in place before we entered into an agreement with the authority. Okay. Also at that July of 2014 meeting, the governing board approved funding of an RO study with the City of Punta Gorda. The RO study was to drill a test well, a production well within the aquifer, test that to determine that the source of the groundwater that they would be using for their RO facility was sustainable. And so that was the intent of the study. So the governing board put out their $1.5 million towards the study for a 50% match. But again, the board linked the two projects together because the Punta Gorda by itself was not a multi-jurisdiction. The governing board said if we can get the pipeline constructed to Punta Gorda and interconnect the facilities, then we'd also consider funding the RO facility, again, contingent upon the RO study coming out favorable and the 30% design like we typically do. So you also place that requirement that the execution of any necessary contracts be in place to construct the pipeline, okay, before we could even enter into an agreement with the City of Punta Gorda for that. Since that time, Mr. Lehman and others from the authority and Punta Gorda and the member governments down there have been working to develop the contracts and the commitments to be able to implement these projects. Mr. Lehman will walk you through what they've been able to accomplish in terms of the commitments. And what they're seeking for today is to get your approval in terms of if you're comfortable with that, then they would be able to go forward, finalize the contract, to get those into place. The other thing that had also been discussed at the July 2014 meeting was Punta Gorda had received some state funding for their RO facility, and you had also given staff direction there that any state funding be used, or federal funding for that matter, get used consistent with the governing board's policy. Policy 130-4 requires that any state or federal funds that the local governments or the water supply authorities receive for the projects get used first. So that comes off the top, and then the district will share typically 50-50 on the remaining portion. So again, those were the requirements that the board provided funding out there, $1.5 million out there for the RO study, $250,000 for the design of a pipeline, contingent upon that they could work out all the necessary contracts so that they get the pipeline constructed before we entered into agreements. So what I'd like to ask is Mr. Lehman to come up and walk you through what they've been able to accomplish and the commitments that they have been able to secure. And then I'll get back up and walk you through the options for your consideration.
Good morning, Pat. Welcome.
Morning. Thank you, Mark, and good morning, members of the governing board. It's been a long time coming, and certainly sometimes it becomes frustrating as you saw the actions of this board were a year and a half ago. So what's happened over that last year and a half? We heeded what your board said. Bring these projects together, integrate them as to one, to the benefit of the region, to the benefit of the city, interconnecting the east side of the river, Peace River, through Punta Gorda, connecting that facility to the regional system, and also creating a new source of water through the RO. You can see there what we're talking about. Our system now ends at the DeSoto-Charlotte County line on US 17, where the Walmart distribution center was built a few years ago. You can see the red there, the interconnection to the city of Punta Gorda. That has been adopted through our board's strategic plan, been on our vision map for many years. Also consistent with the district's strategic plan of interconnecting the southern region. So what has happened over the last 15 months? After your board meeting, the city, the authority came together. We've had a number of discussions with your staff, and we went to the state legislature. The state legislature adopted a budget that included $4 million for this project. The actual proviso language was incorporated, that it was to the benefit to the city for the $4 million, but through some proviso language that money would be then transferred to the authority for the pipeline. That language was never incorporated into the budget, but the legislature, the city, the authority are abiding by that language. So that $4 million is to come to help pay for the pipeline. That survived the governor's veto yield and was included in the budget that was signed and effective July 1st for this current fiscal year for the state. The DEP is also on board as to writing that agreement, the funding agreement, to come to the pipeline for the benefit of the city and the authority. Of late, in December of last year then, with that money in hand, the city, the authority entered into an actual agreement for the pipeline, for the integrated projects themselves. Number of items in there, but of significance to the pipeline is the city would contribute $2 million to the pipeline. So in total, there's $6 million provided for the pipeline itself. Exactly what the pipeline is, you can see the yellow there, the authority's regional system ends at the county line of Charlotte, DeSoto County on US 17, right at the Walmart system. It is approximately, the red line is the proposed new pipeline, 6.3 miles of 24-inch diameter, going down and interconnecting the Shell Creek water plant. And the important thing to realize that this is a plant-to-plant connection. Not just interconnecting distribution systems, plant to plant. So water can be transferred from the Peace River facility to Punta Gorda and distributed to their customers, or from the city to the Peace River facility, and then utilized on the regional basis. Estimated cost $12 million, design permanent construction schedule, approximately 30 months. DeSoto County has through contracts that were done in 2005, designated the authority as their exclusive provider. What does that mean? That means that the county has turned total development of their water supplies to the authority. In exchange, the authority must meet all water demands for the county. So the county no longer has the ability to expand, construct their own water supplies. It is totally delegated to the authority. But then the DeSoto County Board of County Commissions have adopted a resolution just in the last 2 weeks requesting that this project be done through the authority and as a ready project serving DeSoto County. What is the value of water to the economy? As I said, right now, Walmart distribution center exists on US 17. US 17 is recently been 4-laned. That is the future of DeSoto County. That is their commercial development for the future. A poor county where the ad valorem is still going down needs all the help that we can give them. And certainly the importance of water is truly documented through a number of sources as to what that means. That critical infrastructure, reliability of water, is certainly a critical component for all businesses that are looking to relocate. So let's take a look at what exactly this project means. Here we have the existing system distribution from the authority today. You can see where the green line being the DeSoto County utilities that goes up and serves along US 17 and then on up to Arcadia. What happens? What happens if that single connection were to break? Something happens to it. Their entire system is out. You have to look no further than Flint, Michigan today to understand what that means. With 100,000 people up in Flint out of water because their connection to Detroit is no longer there. So with a connection to Punta Gorda, that is the reliability of the system. That is the future to DeSoto County's reliability economic development. If something were to happen to the existing pipeline, there's an alternative to serve their customers and certainly businesses in the future. So how have we talked with your staff to fund this? You can see the state appropriation in hand for $4 million. Punta Gorda is providing contribution of $2 million through the authority. SWFWMD would have cooperative funding of typically $4 million if you were to deduct the 4 and divide the remaining 8. But through the county being a ready county and working through the authority, what we've requested and been working with is that 75% funding, which would add $2 million, adding up to the total $12 million for the project. What are some of the other caveats that we've talked about with your staff to make it even a better project? Certainly, we have an estimate of $12 million under the current economics. If we get going, I'm fairly confident not only is it $12 million, but I think we can do it for less. It's strictly a pipeline. We've cut out storage tank pumping. It's not needed right now. So any of those project savings would come straight off the district's portion first. If there were to be new funding applied to this, other than SWFWMD funds, if we were to get more from the state or other sources, that would also slice off straight from the district funds. So there's opportunity to reduce that $6 million by the district, by project savings or other outside sources. Also, water is becoming indivisible between wastewater, reuse, stormwater, water quality. The authority, and I've talked to different board members, and our authority will be talking about it, creating a One Water initiative to help enhance the water quality, reuse, conservation within the area. It's not exactly a new concept. It was actually done years back with the Peace River option expansion of the authority and funding through the district. Under that funding agreement, the authority was to create $18 million of reuse conservation projects by our members to offset the $18 million that was contributed through the district. That was back in 1995. Did it work? What happened? I can tell you conservation projects of over $1.3 million were implemented by our members. Reuse projects, well over $17 million. So we were well above the $18 million that we were to invest in. And I can tell you these numbers are back in 2010. Once we exceeded the $18 million, we quit counting. And I know there's a number of projects since then that have been implemented by our members. On top of that, water offsets. Rotunda West Utilities, connected into Charlotte County Utilities. Their water use permit was retired, 1.7 million gallons. A number of golf course water use permits were retired due to reuse. So there is not only the economic investment, but also the benefit in the SWFWMD of water offsets. So as we look today, 2016, think back to 1991, 25 years ago, the silver anniversary of the authority having the Peace River facility. Back then, Charlie Black sat as chair of this board. Ed Chance sat as chairman of the authority board. Those two gentlemen had a vision beyond any of our concepts to purchase that facility, turn it into a regional system. And I think today, as they look down, I think they'd be happy and smiling that that's exactly what happened. So what we're looking for is now to the future and building a region and expanding on the regional system. It's unique. We're finally bringing a city connection, the largest water use facility not connected to the authority system in the 4 counties will now be connected with a water supply that's of regional benefit, along with a pipeline that immediately will provide the reliability to DeSoto and certainly over the years benefit to the region and the city. I have Doug Manthan here, our attorney, so any technical, policy, contractual questions, we're here to answer any. Thank you very much.
Pat, for the benefit of some of our new board members, you or Mark want to explain what a ready community is?
It's a Rural Economic Development Initiative by state statute. It's, I'll turn it over to Doug and let him explain. He knows the statutes and all those things a little better.
This is just for information. I wasn't sure.
Well, I'm not sure how much further you want the explanation to go, but what it does is identify economically disadvantaged areas in the state, specifically in this case, DeSoto County. And there's a set of criteria, and DeSoto County is a ready county. And the idea is there's got to be some component of economic activity that you're enhancing. And we believe that, you know, as you heard from the presentation, this is a critical source of future growth in DeSoto County along that 17 corridor and linking that up. So right now, there's not a water supply south of that Walmart distribution system in DeSoto or Charlotte County.
And there is precedent. We have
Right.
we have funded more than 50% on projects that are ready, qualified.
That's correct.
So we've done other communities. This is not unusual.
And we're just asked this to be considered as ready, knowing the facts of what DeSoto County is. And we know it's somewhat unique. Usually the county would have to come in on their own. In this case, since they're our exclusive customer, we're their agent because they're the only way they can do a water supply project. And for us, distribution lines are part of that water supply project.
Them
Thank
being an exclusive customer
Right.
is what we are encouraging in regional activities for water, regional authorities.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank
Any questions from the board?
I just want to say thank you to Pat, to Doug, to all different counties, staff. I remember going back from May of 14 and the meetings in July of 14 into now. So I just thank you so much for all the good work and being able to look at a project and figuring out the right way for this to work. So I just want to say thank you very much for that, and staff, and Mark and Robert, for all that you guys have done. So thank you.
Absolutely, your staff has been totally engaged and do appreciate it. Thank you.
So, yeah.
You want to explain staff recommendation to us, Mark?
Yes, let's see, again, as Mr. Lehman walked you through on the phase 1 pipeline, and when we ask for the actions, we'll probably ask for those separately. You see on the phase 1 pipeline, again, a $12 million estimated cost, $4 million is the state appropriation, which leaves an $8 million balance. We've got $2 million from the city of Punta, Gorda, which leaves, and what they're requesting is $6 million from the district, which represents 75%. As was just discussed, this board has funded ready projects, and in your board policy, you recognize the state's ready initiative and have waived match requirements. And our practice has been for those ready type of communities. Through your cooperative funding program, you'll fund up to 75% of the project cost on those. We looked at that, and clearly DeSoto County is a ready community, and like they indicated there, they're exclusive provider. And so we think that the basis for that in terms of 75% match is appropriate for your board's consideration. We did one change that we got in the recommendation is in the recommendation we had included, or we're asking that you consider the project as a ready project. What we thought is since the project is also benefiting other parts of the region in terms of other communities that are not ready, we said, well, just use that as the basis for the 75% funding, but not necessarily, you don't have to designate it as a ready project. Again, as they pointed out, any savings, contractually what we would do is if the board approves this, any savings would be used to reduce the district's contribution. So for example, if the project was to come in $11.5 million, that $500,000 savings would reduce our share, the $6 million, by $500,000. As Mr. Lynn indicated, the authority members would invest up to $6 million in conservation and reuse projects out there. That it's a same type, consistent with what this board had done back 20 years ago with a similar type of project with the authority. Again, state or federal funds that might be received in the future if there's for this project would be used consistent with the board policy. We think that's very important there, that it's been a long-standing practice of this board there that we work with our partners to get state and federal funding, and if we're able to secure that there's an equal share. When state funding or federal funding comes to us, to a local government, we do the same thing in terms of we don't take all the benefit of that. We share that benefit with the local governments when we receive state funding for projects on that. Again, we'd still contractually require that any necessary contracts and approval for the Phase 1 pipeline be in place. Again, that includes the contract for the funding would still have to be put in place, and the approvals to allow the construction of the pipeline with Charlotte County. Currently, I would like to point out that the district has budgeted $5.65 million. You put in, back in 2014, you put $250,000 in there for design. We have not spent any of that yet. Through the cooperative funding process last year, we also budgeted $5.4 million. So if the board approves up to $6 million on this, then what we'd do is we'd put the balance, or $350,000 would be in the 2017 budget. But the Punta Gorda RO project, again, the estimated cost on that is $32.2 million. One change that's from the recap, we did discuss this with Punta Gorda. They have received $900,000 of state appropriation for the RO project. So like the board discussed back in 2014, that would come off the top, leaving a balance of $31.3 million. And their ask is that the district fund $15.65 million for that. We've got right now $1.5 million in the budget for the RO study. So what the district would have to budget would be the difference between the 15.65 and 1.5, or was it 14.15 million would be a balance of what the district would have to budget. That would be contingent upon the RO study being completed, and that it would be verified that the source water is sustainable. The city is proceeding with that, and they would have the results of that, and we would evaluate that to make sure that the source water is sustainable out there. Typically, as we also do, since this is greater than $5 million, would require the third-party review on this. And so we would look at those costs to make sure that the costs are reasonable before we go forward with that. And that would all be part of one contract. All this would be built into a contract if you approve this. Again, any additional state and federal funds would be used consistent with the board's policy. Again, we're requiring there that the Phase 1 pipeline be constructed. So for any reason the pipeline's not constructed, we not provide any funding for the RO, because again, the board has linked these two projects together, consistent with the direction from the board. Also, as part of, since Punta Gorda project would be a multi-jurisdictional project, there's an operational agreement required just to ensure there that the systems are operated in a fashion consistent with the board policy. Again, the authority projects themselves are considered regional because of the authority, and they get the highest priority. Multi-jurisdictional projects in the board policy or when two entities work together. And so the policy requires that we would review that operational agreement to make sure it's consistent with the board policy. And again, that would be included, and we would be reviewing that as we go forward. Again, the staff's recommendation, and again, one is slightly different than what was in the packet, and then probably have one more slight change. This is consider funding 75% of the $8 million, which would be waiving your typical 50% match requirement. So the $8 million balance after state funds for the Water Supply Authority Phase 1 interconnect, and provide up to $6 million for the project. Again, the basis of that 75%, that's what we do for ready communities. The DeSoto County has requested this and requested to consider ready, and so we would use that same basis as the rationale for funding that 75%. The second recommendation there, if you approve item 1, then we consider that for approved funding for the Punta Gorda RO project, with the district contributing up to 15.65. And the last one is simply authorizing the assistant ED to execute the agreements. Typically, if we include projects in the budget, that authority is already there. When we bring in out-of-cycle type of items like this, we also ask for the board to approve or give us authorization to enter into those agreements. So again, those would be the staff recommendation. I'll open up for questions that you may have.
I thought on recommendation number 1 that you had netted that down to $5,650,000. Technically, are you saying leave it at $6 million?
What we'd be asking the board to approve is funding up to $6 million. The 5.65 is currently in the budget, but what's in the budget, we don't have the authorization to spend it because it was all contingent upon getting the approvals. So this would just give that official approval so that we would have authorization to go in and enter into the contract. But right now you have 5.65 in the budget. We would only budget an additional 350.
Oh.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a few comments here. I've been involved in this project, I guess it's been a couple of years now, and I need to give some recognition as well here to the Punta Gorda, City of Punta Gorda leadership, Charlotte County leadership and their representatives, Pat at the Water Authority, and especially district staff. I couldn't be more pleased. I do fully realize that this was not easy. As a matter of fact, I'd admit it's probably at points flat out painful. But is it exactly what I want? No. Do I feel that it was a healthy compromise by all the parties involved in this and ultimately in the interest of the taxpayer? I do. I'm very pleased that it's happening in the order as it should be, with expanding the strategic vision for the regional connectivity, and I am optimistic and hopeful that the city of Punta Gorda will get the results that they're expecting and ultimately get their long-term vision for this RO facility to be a reality. With that said, I'd like to make a motion to approve item number 24 as presented with the amended staff recommendations.
We have a motion to approve staff recommendation. Second. And we have a second. We had some other comments. If you don't mind, we'll come on around. John, you first.
Thank you. I understand the importance of course, water for development purposes. But as I understand it, the ready projects are typically funded at 50%. And now we're proposing to fund this at 75%. Is that correct?
No, the ready projects typically will fund those at 75%.
They are typically funded at 75%.
Yeah, for just the ready communities, which are Hardy, DeSoto, and Highlands County, and a couple of cities in, I think, like Coleman up north and Frostproof down south in Polk.
That explains it then. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my comments piggyback that a little bit, but I preface my remark by agreeing with Mr. Moran and others who have said great cooperation in getting it to this point, so kudos for that. My focus is really on the funding side. We've got 2 or 3 moving parts here for this that I think we're breaking policy a little bit. And we typically would take the money that comes from the state off the top and then split the difference, recognizing the ready aspects of this. Mark, I think you said that ready project, we typically routinely would fund 75% of the total project. So what we've got going on here is we're lopping off the 4, then we're taking 75% of the net. And when I do the math, when you take the total project cost of $12 million, the state of Florida is funding 33%. The district is funding 50%, and so our cooperatives are only funding 17% of the total project. And I'm worried about setting policy and precedent for others who might come forward. And I would like to sort of say maybe we should compromise a little bit. They don't have to do their 50% of the 8, but I'd like to keep it to 75% of the total, which would mean they'd have to come with $3 million instead of 2. Those are my comments.
Yeah,
Other comments?
Just to clarify, with the Ready, if just a Ready community came in and they had state funding, we would take that off the top, and then their balance fund 75% of the remaining, like we proposed here. But you are correct, that does significantly reduce their contribution into the project.
Yeah, see, it seems a little unusual that I guess they're committing that they will bring $15.65 million to the second phase of this, the other half of it. Yet it's awfully skinny on the main project for the Connect. I just think that's 17% of the total cost is really a precedent-setting item that I don't feel comfortable with.
Comments from the board? Hearing none. Yes, Wendy?
I don't have any heartburn at all. I think we're following policy. I think we're trying to help a disadvantaged community, and there have been mechanisms set up to help these communities in that way. I don't think that we're violating any of that, so I have no heartburn at all with what you've proposed.
Mr. Beltran, did you have a comment to add?
Just for clarification for some of the discussion at hand here, I think in the Ready Community state statute, it allows the state actually to fund up to 100%, recognizing that disadvantage element. Our board practice has been to do 75%. Is that correct,
That's
Mark?
correct.
So there is some precedent there, even at the state level, to fund beyond the 75%. I just wanted to clarify that for everybody to understand.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board?
One other comment, sir.
Mr. Maynard?
I want to echo a couple of those sentiments, especially with Mr. Moran. I was pleasantly surprised to see this come at this quickness. You know, past board meetings, as we had these discussions, I'm like, this dog's not going to hunt. So I was pleasantly surprised to see it come this. I do hope that all stakeholders understand how important regionalism is to this board and how we have been very, very consistent across the board with that. I do agree with Mr. Dunbar's math, but I do not have heartburn over it. I got a Mark Hammond saying now. I use heartburn all the time. This is heartburn to me, so I'm not trying to take your lingo, but it works on this one. So, but I do appreciate Mr. Dunbar pointing that out to the board because it does need to be pointed out. But I don't have heartburn over it for this project.
I just would add one thing. I appreciate the authority getting together with Punta Gorda and getting Punta Gorda involved or more included in the regional effort that the authority represents. So I'm comfortable with that authority and your territory and the fact that everybody's at the table working together now. So I'm looking for any other comments. If not, I'll call the question on the motion. No more comments. Question on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries by a unanimous vote.
Thank you.
On to item 25. Mark, you're still up, and this is information only. The 5-year Water Resource Development Work Program.
Yeah, that's just a submit and file report. And again, for the board's information, we're required to prepare that report each year, submit it up to the state. We did get the okay from DEP, so we're just letting you know that we got the okay from DEP, and now that report is included as part of a consolidated report that'll be submitted up to the state, I think in the next couple of months. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? I'm not going to let you sit down without answering questions. All right. Item 28 is for information only as well, minimum flows and levels report. Other business to come before us, we will adjourn the Resource Management Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll call the Finance and Outreach and Planning Committee together. Item 28, we had no consent items moved for discussion, so our first item is number 29, which is the Investment Advisor's Contract Renewal Options. Turn it over to Linda Howard. Linda?
Good morning to the board. My name is Linda Howard, Finance Bureau Chief. This is an action item where we're seeking your approval on our recommendation for investment advisors. At our last board meeting, we did have several items that we discussed. One of the items was whether we will have one or two advisors. We also talked about extending our existing contract, piggybacking off of a similar contract, or bidding the services out. After discussion at our last meeting, the board did determine we're going to go with one advisor. In addition to that, the board did direct staff to go and do a little more research on piggybacking and come back with a recommendation. So that's what we'll be doing today. Just as a refresher from our last meeting, our current contracts, one with PTA, their contract will end July 1st, 2016, and the contract with PFM will end on July 24th, 2016. That's what started our conversation. We also took a look at the performance of our two investment advisors just to give you an idea of where they are at the end of our fiscal year. Next month, we'll also give an update on where they are at the end of 12/31. But as we see here, PTA, on the short term, they're at 47 basis points versus the index of 26, so they're beating the index. PFM has two pieces of the portfolio. In the 1 to 3 year, they're a little bit behind the benchmark, 77 versus 84. And then in the new benchmark that the board directed them to start in October, they were at 98% versus 85%. So they are beating the benchmark in the 1 to 5 year portfolio. Any questions about where the advisors are, our current advisors are at this point in time?
Just a quick comment before we leave that. There was some apprehension about us extending out back in the days when Carlos was here, and I sort of echoed them because we all sort of thought interest rates were going up. They have moved a little bit, and when they go up, the value of our portfolio gets hindered, and we have to recognize it. Some of the good news, if there is any, out of last week's meltdown is interest rates again have come back, and there's a flight to safety, so our portfolio, I think when you see it next month, will actually increase. So that's a little silver lining of what otherwise was a pretty bad week. So.
Just wait till the following week.
Yeah, and our advisors will give a update next month through 12/31. The other thing we talked about last month a little bit at length was on piggyback. So we wanted to come back and make sure we give a little more detail on what a piggyback is, what it does, and some of the requirements. Our board policy 150-1, it allows the district to piggyback off of another governmental entity's contract if it's determined to be cost effective and in the best interest of the district. That's our board policy. Now, the Florida statutes requirements, it authorizes special districts like our district to piggyback for purchases of contractual services if the item has been procured competitively and if the other entity's procurement policy would have met our policy. And our policy states that any procurement over $100,000 must be competitively bid, either using a request for bids or a request for proposal. So in the recommendation you'll see from us today, our job was to make sure they met those requirements before we make a recommendation to you. And then lastly, the scope of the contract that we're piggybacking off of has to be substantially what we would do without making major changes. And this requirement that it has to be substantially the same means that there are no substantive changes that the district has to make for us to accept their contract. And those were the things we kind of went through when we were looking at some of these contracts to make sure they met those requirements. I just want to take a moment to see if there are any other questions on piggybacking or anything else we need to clarify on piggybacking, what's allowed and what's not allowed. Okay. And that kind of brings us up to speed on what we covered last month. So what we did, we went out to try to secure as many contracts as we could that we thought might be piggybackable. Now, there's a lot of data on this sheet, so I highlighted our current contracts for you in green. Our PTA contract is here at the top. PFM is here highlighted in green just so you can see where we are. These are in order of their fees. These fees are based on a $300 million portfolio. And PTA is at the top. We got contracts from PTA. They sent us 3 additional contracts. PFM sent us 3 additional contracts. We also got contracts from Cutwater, Chandler, and Davidson Fixed Income. We feel that all these firms are very qualified and they could meet the district needs. The big key difference we felt on all of these was really going to boil down to their fees. In addition to the fees, though, we did look at the contracts, some of the terms real broadly, and we also looked at their contract dates, start and end dates. As you'll note, all of the contracts that we're listed here start after our existing contracts, because we wanted to make sure they were newer contracts than our existing contract. So our contract started in July 2013. All of the ones we have listed here started sometime after July 2013. Now, the contract end dates are all kind of different, but we listed those and we relisted the renewal options as well, so the board could see the flexibility or lack of flexibility in the contracts that we looked at. Now, once we reviewed all of these, we narrowed it down, in our opinion, to what we consider to be the top 3. PTA, the Hernando County clerk, PTA did have several, but the Hernando County clerk one we thought was the best suited for us. The contract terms we felt were good. The fees are the same as what ours are. The contract period gave us some flexibility. This contract will end October of 2017, which is next year. It gives us another year beyond where we are now. At that time, we can decide to do something totally different, or they have 2 two-year renewals. Gives us some flexibility. That's why we put that contract as first. The fees and the contract flexibility we thought were the best. Second, we looked at Cutwater. They had the second lowest fees. This was a 5-year contract, so it'll end in October of 2018. Again, that gives us 2 years beyond where we are now. And then we would have to make some decisions because that contract will end in 2018. The last one we looked at was with Chandler Asset, City of Leesburg. It was the 3rd highest or lowest of the fees, and it's an ongoing contract that had no real end dates, so that would give some flexibility as well, but that one did have the highest of the 3 fees that we looked at. So based on those 3, we then made a recommendation that the district enter into a piggyback contract with PTA in their Hernando County contract, based on the terms and conditions that we had in that contract. And that's our recommendation, but we'll entertain any questions. If there was anything I need to backtrack or re-emphasize, I can do that, or answer any other questions that you have.
Could you just go 1 slide back, please?
Oh, oops. I went the wrong way.
Just so I understand that, sorry to slow it down. On that one for the Hernando County that you're recommending, so in October 21st of 2017, if for whatever reason we were just not comfortable with the relationship, we execute a notice of termination, we're out.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And that was the flexibility we definitely wanted to point out. Those end dates mean we can end them at that time, do a rebid, or again, we could use the renewal options that are there.
Independent of what Hernando County does, if they don't agree we could continue with it?
Correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
You want to allude to this, but also not only can we get out of the contract, but during the time from an investing philosophy, we have full control. We don't have to follow Hernando's control. We still can invest the way we want, follow our current statutes, change it up or down.
Yeah, they would follow our investment.
Yeah, they would follow our investment policy. One of the addendums is Hernando County's investment policy is in there, that we would make it our investment, the district's investment policy would be substituted for that addendum.
That's a good question. Other comments? Yes, sir.
Did you? Okay. I will be consistent. I am for the one. I am against the piggyback and here's why. I'm a free market individual. I'm not saying nobody else on this board is not, but we're comparing ourselves against the governments. Sure, that's the competition. How many of us make an investment based on what the government does? We don't.
There is that the policy required us to be sure that they bid it in the same manner that we would have bid it. So all the ones that they looked at were competitively bid against an RFP.
We looked at their we actually got a copy of their request, in this case, request for proposals, and they did follow the same procedures as we did. So we did look at their RFP in this case.
That we feel that Hernando County Clerk of Court went out and made the best deal. That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Better than we would have done. If we would have
or
put
in
it
this
out on
case,
the
the
free
same
market,
as we would.
they would we put this out on the free market, let other companies bid this. Hernando County was the best deal.
I can't guarantee that, but we think they did a good job in terms of soliciting a competitive bid. Could we get a better price? We might.
The difference might be if you allowed others outside of the RFP. When an entity, whatever government entity, puts an RFP out there, you get a bevy of people that say, we're qualified, we'd like to bid it. I think the part we can't opine on is whether or not all of the potential bidders on Hernando's RFP would be the same as the bidders that might bid on SWFWMD's RFP. So in that context, you might be correct. There might be another bidder out there that potentially could have. But I think there's a volume of folks here that bid a lot of, I don't know how many you had in total on that first page, but that's a lot of potential bidders to take a look
You
at.
still have three. Let's watch it. PFM, which we're a part of, and PTA, and then you have, Cutwater, 4 in Chandler. I cannot believe with $300+ million, there are not companies out there that would not take that for what we do, and it's a fairly simple investment.
Well, I think what you might be right, but I would tell you that there's probably 10 or 12 that bid all of those RFPs. These are the winners. So there's probably 100 people that bid, but these were the winners for these various entities. So anyway.
We did try to
Comments,
solicit. Now, we did try to solicit. We called contacts that we knew. There are a few financial firms that don't do investment advisory services anymore because they want to do something else and there was a conflict. We did go to the FGFOA listserv and try to solicit ones, which we didn't get. But you're right, there could be others that would have bid that didn't, but we did try all we could to get as many as we could. A couple of these, if you notice, Chandler, a couple of them are out of state. We put them on here just for comparisons. We don't think we need to go to California because we think there are good ones here in Florida. And we do believe that PTA and PFM hold many of the contracts in Florida because they are the most popular firms in Florida for this service. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Smith?
what we're saying is that rather than going through the bid process right now, we're going to make one change and put it all with one, and we'll be committed for this 21 months, less than 2 years, to the date in 17, and see how it works, giving it a little more time before we go back out for bid again, or we might continue. We have the option of continuing it again for a 2-year period at that time, but before then, probably within 12 to 13 months, we can consider going out, whether we're going to go out for bid or not.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Matt?
Yeah, also, I want to remind the board, was it 3 or 4 years ago, Randy, we did go out and with a much larger opportunity for investing. We probably had between 12 or 15 organizations, all the way from PTA to Goldman Sachs, came in here, and myself, Carlos, and I believe it was Jennifer. Was that right?
Yes.
And we evaluated.
I think there were 12.
Read 25 pounds worth of material that came to our doorstep. At the end of the day, we believe PTA and PFM were the best organizations to represent us. And now looking at this, what we want to do, realizing we pushed very hard to get the appropriate fee at that time on a much bigger portfolio. I think the way that we're moving forward with PTA and Hernando is the appropriate choice. If we believe maybe by October of next year it's time to go out, do this at this time. But knowing what we went through several years ago, I think this is the best opportunity for us.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? All right, I'd entertain a motion on staff recommendation.
Move approval. Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Thank you, Linda. Got one nay vote. Mr. Maggart.
I'm that guy.
We still like Mr.
Item number 30 is
Just gonna sustain, right?
Colleen. I think they passed the water bill.
I did. Good morning. For the record, Colleen Thayer, Public Affairs Bureau Chief. And as you all know, session started last week, so we're a week in, and then had a quick day off.
So this will be a brief update because we haven't done too much in session. The first week started with the governor outlining his priorities, and they are highlighted here. Of course, growing jobs, cutting taxes by $1 billion, and the creation of a new business incentive process at Enterprise Florida, the new Florida Enterprise Fund. And it's a $250 million dedicated trust fund that the governor is promoting to help diversify Florida's economy and support small business. Those were the state priorities. And then with regards to the legislative focus the first week, that focus was addressing some priorities that did not pass at the end of the last session. This included the Senate President's priority legislation to help persons with disabilities complete their education and get jobs, and the Speaker's priority of state water policy, which I know you all are aware of. Both of these bills passed the first week and are now sitting on the governor's desk awaiting action, which he has, I believe it's 15 days to do. The water bill is essentially the same as what I outlined for you a couple months ago. On this slide are the major highlights. The bill provides timeframes and reporting requirements and sets up additional oversight and puts emphasis on springs. It is pretty forward-looking, taking into account that the population of the state's going to continue to grow and the natural resources need to be protected now and into the future. And as mentioned before, the Central Florida Water Initiative is a portion of that bill and is now codified in that legislation. There's provisions added to the consolidated annual report, specifically water quality and water quantity project information, and a focus is put on our outstanding Florida springs, including setting MFLs, BMAPs, and TMDLs, and working with local governments and utilities on wastewater issues. And so there's just a couple bullets on there. Coming up this week, the small surplus land legislation that we've been working on, that bill did pass a committee in the Senate before session started, and it is up in Senate General Government Appropriations on Thursday, so we're looking forward to that. Need to get it moving in the House. And Kara, I know, sent you the first weekly report, which pretty much summarized in a little greater detail the water bill, so look for those every week from me. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have as the session progresses. And with that, that's it.
Any questions, comments?
All right.
Thank you very much. Item 31 is the status of the 2016 Consolidated Annual Report. While it is a submit and file, I wanted to give kudos to a big effort by staff to put out that report. I know that you all have gotten a copy of it, but it's difficult for us to put into a booklet something that takes the kind of effort that this staff has done, and our board included, over the course of a year. But that's a good project. Item 32 is the district-wide public perception survey results, beginning on page 127. The rest, routine reports 33 through 38, are filed. And if there are no other questions or comments, the Finance Outreach Planning Committee is adjourned. I turn the gavel over to Chairman Moran, Regulation Committee.
I'd like to call to order the Regulation Committee of the Southwest Florida Water Management District Governing Board dated January 19th, 2016. We had no consent items moved for discussion. We had no denials referred to the Governing Board this month. Submit and file reports in your packet are none. We do have two routine reports, which are items number 41 and 42 in your packet. Are there any questions on the routine reports? Seeing none, the Regulation Committee will stand adjourned, and I'll pass the gavel to Mr. Maggard.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. I call the Operations and Lands Committee together. We have no items on 43 consent were moved. We now move on to item 44, Mr. Kinsman. And it's not raining today.
It's not. But it
It's
will,
not
it will
raining
again.
today. It's cold today, but it's not raining today.
But it will rain again soon.
It will. Well, thank you for that.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. December was once again another warm, dry month. It's kind of strange weather, particularly given the forecast that we've been seeing. But we've seen that shift happen finally. And December or January, we have actually shifted to cool and wetter conditions. So starting with December, you can see really the southern half of the district received normal rainfall, and those areas above it were less than normal. And this really kind of ties into South Florida. South Florida's been seeing a tremendous amount of rain in November and December. They've seen record rains. And this possibly, there's been some discussion whether this is El Nino, but they've seen tremendous rains, and we've been catching the top end of that. Fortunately, that's shifted a little bit here. The 12-month status shows not a whole lot of change, really, from last month, really a high of 79 inches and low of 35 inches, but really no significant difference, except in the northern region. Our northern region has been drier for the past several months, and you can see that the drier than normal conditions have expanded. On a 12-month departure from mean, you can see that last month we were at 2.1 inches. With the rain that we received over the weekend, we were up to 3.4 inches. So we had about 2.3 inches on average in the past couple days. So that's really boosted us here. And this is that rainfall. This shows the reporting stations from north to south. So northern region, central region, southern region. And this dashed line is the monthly mean. Yellow is what is normal for the month, and you can see basically from Hillsborough County south, we've exceeded that, and we've exceeded very strongly in the most southern regions. So we do have additional rain coming later in this week. We've got another almost 2 more weeks left in the month, so I expect this to increase. The graphics I have, because of the holiday, were not updated this morning, but they show the status as of last week. And you can see we've really seen very little change, even given the dry conditions in December. We've seen some declines, but nothing very sharp. You can see where we were this time last year, and in red shows the change from last month. Really very little change, still in the upper range of normal in the northern counties. Central counties still in the very upper range of normal. And you can see the decline in the southern counties still in the upper range of normal. Lakes are probably the indicator that have shown the change the most, and the change, the declines have been very, very minor. And normally this time of year we'd be seeing about 1/4 of a foot, and we've been really only seeing about less than 1/10 of a foot overall. But in the northern region, you can see that they've actually dropped into the low normal or below the normal range for the first time this year, or in the past year. Still looking good in the Tampa Bay region, the Polk Uplands, and actually very, very little change in the Lake Wales Ridge region, and that's partly because of the rain they've received. The Withlacoochee River is showing a decline in the 8-week mean. Not surprisingly, I would expect this is going to rise in the next couple weeks. This is Hillsborough River, still well within the middle of the normal range. The reservoir is full. The public supplies reservoirs are all full. The Alafaya River still in the upper range of normal, even showing the declines. Bill Young Reservoir, full. The Peace River is actually, because of the rains, above the average. And the supply there, they've stopped putting water into the ASR reservoir, but still they've got about 12 billion gallons, 12.7 billion gallons, about 1.2 billion more than they had this time last year. So a significant improvement just because of the rain that we've received in the past year. Climate forecast has not changed. They're still expecting cooler than normal temperatures, above normal rainfall. Hasn't happened to date, but it looks like we're there at this point. And that would extend probably until April, May, is what the current forecast is. And cooler than normal temperatures starting to drop off as we move into the March, April, May timeframe. Strangely, because of this weird weather, we had a hurricane form in January. It's the first time since 1938, and only the 4th time since records started in 1851. So this is kind of interesting early start for hurricane season.
Does that have anything to do with El Nino?
Actually, yes. This actually started in the Bahamas and shifted across the Atlantic.
Went the other way.
Yeah, it shifted off and then took off towards the Azores. It was only a hurricane for one day, but yes, it was related to the moisture stream from El Nino.
Indication how 2016 is going to go.
Well,
we have a hurricane that turns right in the middle of January. What's that?
Well, in terms of hurricanes, if right now we're in a very strong El Nino cycle, that tends to, eliminate strong hurricanes. But even if it drops off, we probably wouldn't see a tremendous hurricane season this year, would be my guess.
Does that mean when hurricane season starts, the first one we have then will begin with a B or A again?
It would start with B.
B, okay.
So in summary, their warm, dry conditions seem to have shifted. Finally, we saw that jet stream shift that I've mentioned. It finally dropped south, and that's what we've got now. And right now, there's no change in the forecast. So I would expect we'll start picking up more and more rain in the next couple of months.
Right. Any questions for Mr. Kinsman? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions on routine reports 45 or 46? Not seeing any. Operations adjourned.
Mr. Maggart, thank you very much. I have the opportunity to go ahead and open up the General Counsel's report. We had one item 20B from the consent agenda moved over to the regular agenda. So at this time, we'll go ahead and open up 20B. Before I call up the four individuals that I have a blue card with, Ms. West, do you mind giving a little bit of a history on the matter, but also tell the board why that this has to go before us for the final order of dismissal? Thank you.
This is an action item for the board on procedural grounds regarding entry of an order concerning a petition for an administrative hearing that was filed by a group of individuals regarding an environmental resource permit application for a 17-unit residential subdivision in Pinellas County that was issued by the district on November 13th, 2015. The recommendation that will be presented to you and has been presented in your packet is not based on the merits of the application, which has been determined by district staff to meet the conditions for issuance for environmental resource permits. And there are a number of folks, as you said, that are here to speak regarding the project. And following that, then Ms. Amy Brennan is here from the Office of General Counsel to kind of walk the board through the procedural aspects of the staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The first individual I here have a blue card with is Barbara Spath. Is that correct?
Morning. My name is Barbara Spath. I live in Glen Ridge East in Ridgemore, and my concern is the 17 homes we're discussing building in the wilds, which would be south of Glen Ridge East. It backs right up to some of the properties. We have an issue in Tarpon Woods where the area has flooded for some 30 years. Our concern is this going to happen to us? We've lived there 20 years. We've never had an issue. But when we had all the rains in the spring, we had water. I've got pictures on my phone. They don't show up real well, unfortunately, and I had emailed them to Lake Lyon in Pinellas County. We have a barrier wall between us and that property, and the water was that far from the top of that barrier, which inevitably then would come into our street. Our ponds drain into those wetlands. Where will that water go when they fill that pond, the one pond that we drain into? The intention, from what I understand, is for them to fill that pond. What happens to us if they, in fact, increase those homes to a 20-foot elevation? Sorry. What's going to happen to us? And if, in fact, as I posed the question, we had a town hall meeting at the beginning of 2015, and I posed the question to the Pinellas County representative that what happens to us if, in fact, we flood after the builder is out of there? What do we do? You know, I mean, it's a huge concern for us. And what assurance can you give us that this won't happen? Can you, certify that we won't flood once those homes are built and they've already gotten a variance from a 10-foot setback to a 5-foot, which brings those homes even closer?
Okay.
Any assurance?
Before we really talk about assurance or get updates from the staff.
I'm sorry?
Before we get any assurance from the staff or be able to answer your questions, I mean, more than willing, Mark, or if anybody wants to address it, but we can address those after I hear from all four. That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. John Landon.
I'm here on behalf of the developer Wilds Land Company. Also, we're engineers of record for the project. Basically concur with staff recommendations. Here to answer any questions if you have any technical ones later.
Okay,
thank you.
Ken Manduri. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correct.
Good morning and thank you. I live at Ken Mondori. I live at 2785 Hawks Landing Boulevard, which abuts the property for the 17 Homes Development Project. My property elevation currently is around 19 feet, which slopes down to 14 feet. I do have exhibits and photos. We have been, not only myself, but all of my neighbors that surround the area, have been, with the last 3 years of storms that have come through. I know everything is measured through SWFMUD on a 100-year floodplain. The property has changed quite a bit since then. I'm not accurate about if the property of Hawks Landing was built properly. It's the same developer that is developing this property. That property sits at, and that's the Van Wart property, sits at around 14, 15 feet of elevation. They want to rise it to about 20 to 21 feet, which would cause additional flooding, plus vacating of one wetland area and 2 additional ponds that sit on that property, and the removal of thousands of trees that absorb water every day. Not only an economical problem or an ecological problem for the wildlife that lives there, it also abuts, so we have Glenridge East that is in one area, to the south and to the north is Hawks Landing, and over to the east is Brooker Creek Preserve. My question is there a guarantee, or not a guarantee, but where is this water all to go? I do have some exhibits of photos that have been taken, and I know Mr. Land at one time had brought it to my attention about how they measure water, but the elevation of this property, bringing the water higher, there's just nowhere for this water to go. So I'd like to know, how are they going to actually exhibit retaining this water? And the other risk is we live in a one-way in, one-way out, which represents, evacuation issues. The other issue is a hardship issue that every homeowner now has to purchase flood insurance in a non-flood area due to the risk of flooding. So I would like to bring to the board for them to take additional action to look at a better way to assure the homeowners, there's over 100 homeowners that will be affected, that we are assured that this decision by SWFMUD is the correct decision to protect the homeowners, Hawks Landing and Glenridge East.
Thank you very much. And Lori, do you mind grabbing the exhibits if you want the board to see those and pass them out to the board members? Thank you. Ken, thank you very much. Joe Reiser, is that correct?
He did have to leave for a family emergency.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, that's the last of the blue cards. Ms. West, if anyone wants to.
Brennan will present the district's recommendation to the board.
Good morning. I'm Amy Brennan from the Office of General Counsel, and I will be here to present to you the staff recommendation concerning this item. Again, as Ms. West mentioned to you, this is an action item for the board on procedural grounds regarding the entry of an order concerning a petition for administrative hearing that was filed by a group of individuals concerning this environmental resource permit for the 17-lot single-family residential subdivision that was issued by the district on November 13th, 2015. The staff recommendation is not based on the technical merits of the application, but is instead based on legal procedural grounds, as staff has determined that the application meets the conditions for issuance. The applicants published notice of the district's issuance of the permit on November 21st, 2015 in the newspaper, specifically the Tampa Bay Times, and persons whose substantial interests are affected by the district's action have 21 days from the date of publication to submit a petition for hearing, or no later than December 12th, 2015. On December 3rd, 2015, the district received a timely request for hearing from a group of 23 individuals who I've listed on this slide, who live near the proposed project. The law specifies a list of requirements that must be contained in a petition for hearing. If the petition does not contain those requirements, statute requires that it be dismissed at least once without prejudice, affording the petitioners the opportunity to cure the defects. If the petition is not timely, the law requires that the petition be dismissed with prejudice. The original petition, while timely, did not contain all of the requirements required by law. Therefore, on December 15th, 2015, the district issued an order of dismissal without prejudice, dismissing the petition and allowing the petitioners 14 days to correct the noted defects. On December 29th, 2015, the petitioners filed an amended petition. Notably, the amended petition added 6 new individuals who we are referring to as the additional petitioners who are listed on this slide, who were not listed as petitioners on the original petition. While the amended petition was timely as to the petitioners, the amended petition was not timely as to the 6 additional petitioners who were required to file a petition for hearing by December 12, 2015. Also, the amended petition again failed to meet the requirements of law with regard to what information the petition must contain. Because the amended petition with regard to the additional petitioners was untimely, the district must dismiss it with prejudice in accordance with the law. And also, because the amended petition with regard to the petitioners remains insufficient, the district may dismiss it with prejudice, avoiding the need for an administrative hearing and allowing the applicants to have their environmental resource permit. The district has proposed a final order of dismissal with prejudice on 2 grounds: with regard to the petitioners, because they were already provided with an opportunity to cure the defects in their initial petition and again failed to comply with the requirements of law, and with regard to the 6 additional petitioners, because the petition was untimely. So therefore, the staff recommendation is to approve and enter the final order of dismissal with prejudice, dismissing the request for administrative hearing filed by petitioners and additional petitioners. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Amy, thank you very much. And Amy and Karen, I get this, but I don't want this to be an issue because of just kind of a procedural. I want to make sure that all the residents, get clarity to their questions. So I want to kind of address my questions more to Alba and to your staff. Have we had an opportunity to address the concerns? And obviously, we evaluated the permit. And do we think there's going to be any flooding issues for the residents?
The application was in-house over a year, and ultimately it met the conditions of issuance. One of our issues, obviously, was the floodway and flooding issues, and we were satisfied that it was they're providing 3 ponds and increasing the floodway. And if you have any additional questions, Michelle Hopkins can respond to that. But we feel sure that it met the conditions for issuance, and that there's not going to be any additional harm.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Amy, yes. On the failure to comply with the petition requirements, can you tell us what they failed to comply with both originally and I take it they just never fixed those failures?
Yes. In the first petition, it lacked an explanation of how the petitioner's substantial interests would be affected by the agency action, a statement of all disputed facts and the facts that warrant reversal or modification of the agency's action, and the rules or statutes that require reversal or modification of the agency action. That was with regard to their initial petition. With regard to the first amended petition, they failed to include a statement regarding the rules or statutes that require reversal or modification of the agency action, which was also one of the noted defects in the initial petition.
On the petition and the follow-up, were they represented, was it done by council or was it done by the individuals themselves?
I believe it was done by the individuals.
Mr. Henslick, and then
Has district staff or has the applicant's engineers met with the concerned citizens and explained to them how the drainage works and how they are protected by law, and gone through all of that with these concerned citizens?
Good morning. My name is Michelle Hopkins. I'm the ERP Bureau Chief. District staff met with the applicant on numerous occasions. I attended some of those meetings as well. And those were also participated with by the ERP manager who oversees the work of the staff member who is doing that. So we discussed the merits of the modeling in detail.
Were the citizens included in any of those meetings? The people that are complaining?
I don't recall if they were included in some of those on-site meetings, but our staff members had numerous discussions directly with the residents who were concerned about the flooding in the area.
Has it been explained to the residents that it is against district policy, indeed against the law, to add water to their property as a result of the project?
It was explained to them what our rule basis is to cause no adverse impacts, from that system. So we did go through detail in what our permitting requirements are and how it was being addressed.
And has the stormwater design been explained to these concerned citizens as to how it works to give them confidence in the permit?
I think to the best of our ability of our staff reviewers, yes, that stormwater design was explained to them.
Thank you.
Up to that, Mr. Landon, I believe you said you were the engineer of record. Could you give us a little more color on those same questions? What interaction you or your client might have had with the local citizens?
Absolutely. Early on, actually met with Mr. Mondori, who's the lead objector, walked his property. I think had several meetings, told him who to call with Pinellas County, SWFWMD, the Corps, et cetera. Kind of guided him on, who to go to get more information. And then probably about a year ago, we stopped talking. Like Mr. Mondori, it was pretty obvious that this was going to be a contentious, relationship with him. So pretty much, I think just he and the agencies have talked probably over the last year. We initially were going to develop the property right next to him. We abandoned that, and I think some of the pictures you're looking at are of that property, which we do not plan to develop. There is a wet area right adjacent to his house. Thank you.
Ms. Griffin, Mr. Simp.
Well, I agree with the chair. I mean, I'm glad we have attorneys and things on our staff, and I understand that we have rules and regulations, but I think our goal here is to get a permit issued, get the residents to feel comfortable. I would ask that the residents identify what you think perhaps has not been looked at, that it appears, and with conversations we've had, is that they've done a lot of extra modeling in order to make sure that they're issuing a permit that won't cause any damage. Of course, it is against the law, like you mentioned, but that doesn't help you when your property gets flooded. And I would very much like you to understand, if you don't, what the modeling has shown. And if you can, of course, identify something that you think was done incorrectly, or if data was used incorrectly, we would definitely love to hear that. Without something like that, we're just sort of stabbing in the dark, however, that we've done everything that we think we can.
I don't know if it would help for you to see an aerial of the site.
Please.
Thank you.
I guess in the end, it doesn't matter if I'm convinced. It matters that they're convinced, but there's only so much you can do to prove a point, and if there's nothing shown that's in error, then there's nowhere for us to go. So that's what I would ask, that if the property owners do not believe it was done properly, to please identify what that is so that we can make sure that we've done it properly. So, I mean,
okay.
In my experience with y'all, you've always done it properly, so that's why I'm at a loss as to what else you might be able to do.
Well, that's not so in Tarpon Woods. I mean, they're flooded there in Tarpon.
I need a blue card.
Maybe you want to come and visit.
Hey, ma'am, do you mind filing out a blue card? And I'll be glad to put you on record.
But Joe Reiser had to leave, and to think that we don't have pictures.
I'd love to hear your comment, but in order for you to be able to comment, just file a blue card and I'll invite you up.
I can't.
I think it might
Thank
be
you.
helpful for me to just kind of give you a little bit of information about the project. It is located adjacent to the Brooker Creek Preserve, on the western side of Pinellas County, and all of this green space that you see here is part of the preserve. Many of the neighbors who are concerned live in this neighborhood and here. A little bit closer view of this. So this is the project area. It is a wet site and it is very complicated. The engineer took the district's 2009 Brooker Creek watershed study and added additional detail to that to incorporate the design features of this site that would offset, the changes that were being made to the floodplain. And so that detailed modeling was done. It also included breaking down the subbasins, adding additional survey detail, and overall, demonstrated that there weren't going to be any adverse impacts or changes in water levels. So a detailed analysis was done, of that watershed, and it's complicated. And I appreciate their comments on the flooding because it is a wet area. And I want to show you one other document that might help. This is the Brooker Creek watershed study of the conditions that exist today, and that shaded area is all within the 100-year floodplain. So including some of the areas where they live. Now, FEMA does not show this area as a floodplain, but this flood study information has not yet been updated on the FEMA website. Again, that's an insurance map procedure, but based on this study, it's a significant floodplain area based on the flows through the Brooker Creek Preserve.
Thank you very much. I have Paul Sim, Jeff Adams, Mr. Armstrong. Before I ask you guys to speak, do you mind if I call the blue card up? Is that
No,
okay with you guys?
go ahead, and then
You
then
want
I
to
have
comment before? Or can I ask Ms. Schroeder?
ask the speaker.
Ms. Schroeder, do you mind
Go
coming
ahead.
up to the stand? The podium or the stand? All right. Watch too many court.
Thanks for your time.
Sure, thank you.
This is the property in Hawks Landing. There are five homes that border this entire, I believe it's a 60-foot county right-of-way that goes between their yard and Mr. Van Warp's property line. This was just from normal rain, okay? And okay, we had heavy rains, but it wasn't a tropical storm. This whole area, and this water goes down underneath a bridge through the two divisions of Hawks Landing has two pieces, 20 homes in the front, 29 in the back, with a bridge that takes the water from this property down underneath and down through to the southwest, through to Tarpon Woods, I'm assuming. I don't know, I've never walked the creek, but Tarpon Woods has been flooding for the last 3.5 years that I've lived there. They came in and fixed it. It's still not fixed. The roads are impassable. this last rain in July, when you try to go down there to get out of the community, there are people sitting in their yard because their homes are flooded. I don't know where they're going to move this water to right now, but it's here. And water isn't pushed easily. So until somebody can speak to us, we have built our homes now in Hawks Landing. We contribute over $550,000 worth of property taxes from our community. So if we are flooded in there or we have water issues in the community, it will definitely decrease our property values. There will be a stigma attached to that community, and we will have to deal with not only hardship, but potentially future investments. We have families, that's maybe the biggest asset they own. And an evacuation, in terms of trying to get out of there, we would be the last community to get out, because the Wilds would get out, Glen Ridge East, the Wilds, and Hawks Landing. And when we get out onto Ridgemore Boulevard, before you get down to Tarpon Woods Boulevard, that's it. You have 1,200 homes in the Ridgemore Master Association. The density in that community for evacuation is just lopsided. And I just think that it's great when there's land and people always think you can build on it, but there's some areas that just get saturated. And I'm concerned because I'm there first. They haven't built anything in the Wilds yet. And I think we really need to look at the whole picture, not just about whether we're going to penetrate the preserve or the wetlands, but it's everything involved. This water that goes down underneath that bridge has already eroded the bank, and we lost a magnolia tree. So it's already, it's saturated. So I just hope that everybody has looked at everything and not just a matter if we can build a bigger pond in that 12, 20, 13 acres to accommodate the Wilds. We need to accommodate everybody. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sim?
Chair, I put a lot of stock and faith in what staff does. They have the science, they visit these sites, and we don't have that opportunity. But when I hear things that are contradictory or confusing, I want to get clarification. I heard someone say there was an existing retention pond there, and the plans by this developer call for filling that one in, but the new plans will create 3 retention pond areas. If that's the case, if they're deep enough and sea levels under control, they might have an opportunity to improve the flooding in the area. So I would wish staff or someone, Mr. Landon might address that. If there are going to be 3 retention ponds in the new development, replacing the one that they maybe fill in.
I can address that if you'd like. There will be 3 retention ponds in this system that will replace the existing storage that's in the ponds that will be filled. The project will create additional storage. Those ponds will be larger than the storage that currently exists out there. Over 1.3 areas or acres of area that will be providing additional storage. There's also a drainage flowway that's being created between 2 of the wetlands that are on site to improve flows. So the timing of, the level to which the water rises in that watershed is complicated because it's based on the timing of how that system flows through that watershed. So, that's where the modeling gets complicated because it takes all of those parameters into effect. But there will be additional storage with this project.
And even with 3 and additional storage, they could be overwhelmed by a 100-year rain or some that comes quickly. But I'm glad to get that clarification. When I heard these comments that were in conflict, I wanted to be sure I understood it.
All right, now I'll get to 2 lawyers.
We'll be all
Mr. Adams and Mr. Armstrong. George, you have a comment?
Randy, keep him in line, would you? Okay. Amy, again, on the communication with the concerned citizens that filed the petition, in what manner was it explained to them or expressed to them the missing or failure to comply with the requirements in their petition?
In the order that the district issued on December 15th, it explicitly explained within that order the missing details that would need to be included in an amended petition. So it specifically articulates the missing information that is required by law to be contained in a petition.
Did we have any communication from them regarding that as far as any assistance? What do you mean by this? And
Well, I am not aware that we had any communication with the petitioners. The attorney who is handling this matter is traveling to a statewide business meeting today and isn't able to be here. I don't believe that she had any telephone conversation with them. It would be difficult for her to provide them with any advice.
I understand that. My concern and difficulty with this is, it's a whole lot easier to deal with up front and not after the fact. And if I trust our staff, I trust the permitting process. I'm not questioning that per se. I also understand the legal requirements, and I just am a little uneasy on, we've got concerned citizens here. We don't need to be reminded of Tarpon Woods. We're very familiar with that and have talked with those residents repetitively. But they failed, and they failed, not staff, not legal. They failed to comply with legal requirements, not only once, but the second time. And the law sets forth, if that's the case, dismissal with prejudice. They still have avenues they can legally pursue then, but it's a little more difficult for them. Yes, it was their responsibility. They made the decision to do it themselves, to whether they consulted with counsel or not. You all, in doing what you're required to do, they filed the petition. You gave them the dismissal without prejudice. They didn't comply. The next step is a dismissal with prejudice. But I'd sure like, it's a lot more comfortable for the permit to get through based on its merits. And my questions aren't to the science on it or what's going to be done, because I'm confident in staff on doing that. Maybe there should have been, or preferably, better communications, although sometimes after you talk a whole lot, you can still disagree. So my concern, of which there's not an answer, Amy, and I'm sorry for going on here, but is the fact that I sure feel a whole lot more comfortable with this decision being made solely based on the merits of us being right, which I don't question, than on the procedural legal technicality of we have citizens that are here that have concern, and I understand that. And I'll defer to my colleague who will then explain to me how I'm supposed to be able to legally handle this then.
Mr. Midori, I can tell you want to speak, but let me have the rest of the board comment, and then I'll invite you up to speak for a minute if you have any other comments regarding what the board has to say. Mr. Armstrong?
Yeah, just an observation. I'm very familiar with this area of Pinellas County, and there is a flooding problem in that area generally. There has been for years and years and years, and it is a significant flooding problem over a much, much larger area. And I truly feel sorry for the people who've come here today, because their concerns are real, they're legitimate, they live it. And I do feel badly for them. At the same time, I think our task is to step back from that. What's before us is and again, we're not ruling on the merits. This is a procedural question, as I know we all know, but really what's at stake from a scientific standpoint, this is a 17-lot subdivision. And I think what our staff did when deciding whether to issue the ERP or not, in essence, in very simplified terms, is is this, approving this ERP going to worsen the situation? They've decided to issue the permit. They have decided, our staff, that those standards have been met. The situation will not be worsened. And I say this very respectfully to the people who've come here today. If your expectation is that the issuance of this permit will guarantee there's no flooding in that area generally, that's an unrealistic expectation. The problems out there are too great to be solved by the issuance or denial of an ERP for a 17-lot subdivision. The problems are real, but I don't know that this is the proper forum for you all to get the relief I understand you're seeking and I would be seeking if I were in your shoes as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mann?
This might be on staff's knowledge at the time, but do you know if prior to this recent application for a permit, if one has been denied?
I'm sorry.
If a permit has been denied prior to this application.
In recent history?
I'm not aware if a permit has been denied on this site prior to this application.
That general area for the reasons of that the residents are concerned about.
Mr. Mann, let me try to answer that. Since I've been here, we've never denied a permit. We've always tried to get it to permit, whether that means that they reduce the number of lots or they create more storage. We usually get it to permit by modifying it in a way that they can meet the conditions for issuance.
You approach this permit the same way, I assume.
Exactly.
Okay. Our problem is that we can't make Mother Nature comply to a permit or a plan, and it's unfortunate, as Mr. Armstrong said.
This 17-lot subdivision is located in a flood-prone area. You've described already that the applicant is proposing three lakes, is that right? And you've also suggested that those 3 lakes, once in place, will provide or potentially provide greater storage and flood protection than what is there today. So what you're suggesting then is that the design of this project may, even if it's only in a minor degree, help to alleviate some of the flooding conditions that are occurring out there currently. Is that correct?
I don't know that I could say that it's going to improve it. I would have to look back through some of the numbers to see if there's a reduction in some of the stages, but the measure was that it would, not increase it or cause an adverse impact.
Okay, so it will not increase or adversely impact any of the surrounding properties as per the requirements of the district.
That's correct.
And staff has gone through that and evaluated that and documented that.
Yes, that was a detailed drainage analysis that was done with the Brooker Creek study that was modified for this site. They modeled multiple storm events, from small storm events up to the 100-year, 24-hour storm event, and looked at, elevations throughout this property and around the development area to make that assessment.
Okay. I have total faith in our staff and their ability to review that sort of thing. Thank you.
Is this recorded? Will this all be on record?
Yes, it is recorded. If there's no other further questions, Mr. Maduri, I know you have your statement. I'll give you a minute here to make any additional comments.
Again, thank you for your time. Here's my concern. I know we talked about, here's my concern. We're going to elevate that property 6 feet of fill to elevate the road system. That area already floods. That pushes the water somewhere. You're saying you're going to expand 3 lakes or 3 little ponds that are there already that overfill during this process. You cannot dig, I spoke with the county, you cannot dig those wells, those lakes any deeper because the aquifer is pushing upward already. My other concern is that there are 2 ponds they're filling in on that property and 1 wetland that retains some of that water. They will be vacated. Where is this water to go? I mean, where is it to go? That is a concern of every homeowner in there. Yes, we added, and let me say one other thing. I am not an attorney. I did do my best on that, and when I called for help, I was told you have to do your best or hire an attorney. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any last minute comments, or Mr. Adams? I know you're dying to say something. I can see on your face. So.
I was just going to move
Pro bono,
approval.
is that where you're going?
Is it a motion?
That's a motion.
Okay. I have a motion to, for a, go ahead and move for dismissal. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay? Motion passes. Before we move on, I just want to say to all the residents who came here, thank you very much for coming here and addressing your concerns. As a board, we have to trust staff that they've done their job in modeling your neighborhood, reviewing everything regarding the permittee, and most importantly, it is their job, it is their duty to make sure there is no adverse impacts to your properties. We must trust in them and go forward. If there's any other questions that you might have for legal, I'm sure Amy or Karen, you're willing to answer any of their questions. But again, thank you very much for coming out here today. Ms. West, we have no more on the General Counsel's report unless you have any comments regarding any routine reports.
I just want to give you a brief update on some of the things that have occurred since the last board meeting. As Ms. Janet Doherty brought up this morning earlier, since the last board meeting, we did receive 2 challenges to the district's Morse Bridge water use permit application from the Environmental Protection Commission as well as Friends of the River. And the district was able to meet with those folks and satisfactorily resolve their concerns and address those concerns. And so we did not have the need to go to an administrative hearing, and that permit has been issued and finalized at this point. Since the last board meeting, we had the closed session on Parsons. Subsequent to that, in communications with Parsons, they actually reached out to us to schedule a mediation, and we have a full-day mediation scheduled in that case on Friday. We think it's going to be a meaningful discussion based on the conversations we've had with Parsons up to this point, and we hope to have something successful to report to you next month. Skyway Trap and Skeet Club, the district went to a hearing on Skyway's motion to stay our petition for a permanent injunction to keep them from shooting on the remediated property as well as on the district's property. The judge gave them a choice, if you will, and said that he was either going to deny their stay or grant their stay under the condition that they do not shoot over the berm onto the district's property. Skyway has elected the second choice to stay our petition proceeding. However, they are prohibited from shooting over the berm onto the district's property or the remediated property. And last but not least, we have received a petition for administrative hearing on the Suncoast Extension project, and we are in the process of scheduling an administrative hearing on that. And if there are any other questions on any of those, I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Ben, any questions? Ms. West, thank you very much. Mr. Rice, anything on the liaison reports? Are you good? Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Beltran, anything on the director's report?
Please, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate everything that's been happening here at the district the last several years, whether it's the resolution of the Morris Bridge, Lower Hillsborough River Recovery Strategy that started back in 2007, how we track and manage all those legislative activities that Colleen and her staff does, what's going on with this monumental water bill that's recently gone through both the House and the Senate, whether it's how we're doing our permitting and how efficiently we provide that service to our customers out there and how we work with everybody there, or whether it's resolving issues like the City of Punta Gorda and the Peace River Authority we heard today that's been in our house or in our wheelhouse looking at for the last 12 years. You know, we continue to face all these challenges as a staff. We deal with a number of legal issues with Karen and her staff, and I'm just happy with the way everybody continues to fire on all cylinders. The district staff continue to meet all the challenges that we have. We exceed those challenges by good communication with our stakeholders. We continue to exceed those challenges with great service we're providing to everybody, yet we have more challenges coming forward as we move as an organization, and there isn't going to be any let up on the accelerator anytime soon. I see the economy continuing to grow. I see our challenges continuing to be there, and we're ready to meet those challenges. We continue to do all these things. If you recall, over the last several years while cutting our ad valorem income, yet investing in major projects that have really moved the needle for us as an agency and as a district. So I just want to again say thanks. We continue to increase our service. We continue to save dollars where we can. We help stimulate that economy out there, and we continue to do what's right for the resource and for our users. So just want to say thank you to staff overall. That's all I have.
Mr. Beltran, thank you very much for those comments, and obviously this board echoes those, and so again, thank you. I have no reports at this time, but I just want to make sure that all board members and everyone knows, please make note of the upcoming meeting locations. We are on the road, so February 23rd in Sarasota, March 29th in Brooksville, and April 26th in Haines City. The public hearing is now recessed. May I have a motion for adjournment? Are you kidding me? A second, a first and a second.
I'm just drinking.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Nay. Motion carries. Have a good day, gentlemen and ladies.